All right, told you guys to make more YouTube videos. I know I haven't made very many lately. It's summer, there's not a ton going on, but there was big news in the wrestling community. Russia not going to the Olympics. I hate it. I freaking hate it. And I'm gonna tell you why I hate it. And so let's start. Reason number one, I just wanna see the best wrestlers. That's all I really wanna see is the best guys wrestle. We get that in a lot of other sports, right? We're still seeing that in mixed martial arts. And in wrestling, we're not getting that. And now, obviously, the end point I'm gonna make is let's just make this a damn pro league so we get to see these things. But for now, let's start with this. Okay, the UWW/IOC. It's kind of stupid because there's only one rep per country, right? This is on FRL I talk about this all the time, more than one rep per country. Because we have all these transfers. So now, like, you kick Russia out of the Olympics, but you also have Russians wrestling for how many other countries? Now, for you simpletons, I know they're not actually wearing a Russian flag on their singlet, but to me, someone who lives in Russia and trains in Russia is a Russian, okay? Just as people who live in America and train in America but wear different singlets, those are Americans to me. Seabass wearing a Puerto Rican singlet, he's American, okay? Stevan Micic, he wrestles for someone else, he's American. Okay, RBY, I'm pretty sure he still trains in State College the majority of the time. That's an American. I know they're wearing different singlets. I totally get it, guys. But to me, where they actually live and train is probably more important than what kind of colors they're wearing when they do it. And this is kind of why it's stupid. We have all these transfers, because what the athletes realize and what the smart fans realize is what we want is the best athletes representing in the bracket. Okay? So I want the best 32 guys there. I don't really care what countries they're from. If there's 7 Russians and 5 Americans, then so be it, right? But the UWW/IOC prevents this from happening because only one entrant per country is allowed, thus creating this transfer situation. So if we just have more reps, this problem be solved. I know that wasn't totally against Russia, but this is the premise is I want to see the best wrestlers wrestle. So when I don't get to see them, it really, really annoys me. I mean, true representation, that's what really matters, right? So why are they not banning the Russians that are wrestling for other countries like they're banning Russia? Are we really just so simple that we're all focused on what color singlet they're wearing rather than like who they actually are, where they're actually from, and what they're actually doing? Because to me, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, this was kind of the premise of NCAA wrestling. And I think why people loved NCAA wrestling is when someone showed up at Ohio State or Penn State, they were likely there for 5 years, and they got to know those people, they got to see them over and over and over, and then it felt like they were a true representative of that university. Now, NIL is kind of changing this, right? This sucks because people are going to where they're getting paid the most. Iowa is the biggest example. Listen, you can't fool me. Those aren't Iowa Hawkeyes. That's Kyle Parko. He was at Arizona State. Ja'Cory Teamer, that's an Arizona State guy. That's not a Hawkeye. Michael Caliendo, Jared Franek, right? Okay, so you get the picture. So, number one, I just want to see the best wrestlers wrestle. I wish we allowed multiple representation. I think that would solve all this transfer issue. And then, right, that doesn't solve the Russian issue, but we would actually be less worried about just what colors on the singlet. I really, really, really don't get that. So, point number 2, Russians. Here's when they should have been, guys, they should have been kicked out in 2016. If you guys read the McLaren report, there was, I want to say it was like 2,600 failed drug tests. I mean, the amount of doping they were doing was totally insane. So why didn't the IOC kick them out? It wasn't politically convenient to kick them out right there. They're weak, they're impotent, and they said, oh, we need Russia because Russia's gonna bring eyeballs, it's gonna bring money, because that's the only thing the IOC really cares about is money and eyeballs, which eyeballs bring money, of course, so I guess all they really care about is money. So 2016 is when they should have been kicked out, because what do I care about? I care about fair and equal competition, and if one group of people is cheating, then they probably shouldn't be allowed to compete. Just like when someone gets popped in, say, the UFC, well, what happens? They get suspended for 12 months or a year or whatever. That didn't happen in 2016, even though we had widespread cheating and all kinds of proof. Okay, go read the McLaren report. It's very, very damning. The other thing I would throw in there is that all of the athletes who were popped in the McLaren report, I guess I could see how some of you guys could argue this, but they had a choice what was put in their own body. They could have said, no, I don't want to do that. I realize it was state sanctioned, which means, right, they weren't making the individual choice to go cheat. That's what would happen in America, right? If someone wanted to cheat, they would go find their own steroids, they would go find their own EPO, they would go find their own person to administer these things, and that's how they would cheat. But in Russia, it was state sanctioned, right? So the state governing body is saying, hey, here's the supplies, here's how you beat the test, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. But the athlete is still being the one making the choice about what he's putting in his body. And so with this situation, well, the Russian athletes, they have no control of governmental affairs. They can't go and protest and say, hey, we don't want to be in the war because we want to wrestle. They can't do that, right? This 2016 was something where the athletes chose to do those things, essentially. And 2024 is a situation where, no, they didn't really choose that, right? They didn't really choose to start a war. So let them compete. Okay. Point number 3, and this is who's the arbiter of who gets kicked out, right? I was thinking about the history of the Olympics. So obviously there was the ancient Olympics. The modern Olympics started in, I think it was 1896. I should have looked that fact up before I started. 1896, 1900, somewhere around there. Britain, they subjugated half the planet, right? There was a lot of the planet that was under British rule, and they still got to compete in the Olympics, right? America, we went to Vietnam, which was maybe unnecessary, and now, I think now most people would admit that we still got to go to all the Olympics. So right now, there's multiple other wars going on in the world. Who chooses? So the Olympic ideal, right, is the idea for setting. This is from their website. I really stole something with it. The idea for setting rivalries aside, there is more that unites us and divides us. That's what the Olympics was founded on. That's what it should be about, is that we're all going to come together for this sporting competition, and we're going to set everything else aside for the time being, and we're going to do this. Okay, so that would be nice if that happened, right? But what I would like, okay, I'll go back to point 1. I just want to see the best wrestlers wrestle. Now, this is what makes me jealous, right? Golf, they have a pro league. Tennis, pro league. Bicycling, pro league. There's all these, mixed martial arts has a pro league. There's all these other individual sports who don't really feel like they need the Olympics, right? We are so worried about the Olympics. Why can't we just have our own pro league where we make our own rules, our own weight classes? We get to determine who has representation, right? So there could be multiple representatives per country. So I think, to me, this would be a great opportunity for someone to say, you know what, in 2024, we didn't get to see a real world championships. And listen, I'm not going to put an asterisk, and any American who wins an Olympic title this year, they're an Olympic champion to me, just like they were in 1984. Now, the Olympics in 1984 was easier, of course, right? I don't care. They could not control their opponents. They're an Olympic champion. These 2024 Olympic champions also, no asterisk, that's just what they are. You can't control who shows up. You can only fight who's ever across the mat from you, right? Okay? But this would be an amazing opportunity for someone, maybe you flow wrestling, never know, right? To say, hey, we didn't get a real world championships in 2024. Let's do this. Let's start a pro league. Let's make these weight classes. Let's have the 16 best. Let's have a qualifying tournament. And then, obviously we'd probably need some big bounties, like say in ADCC and jiu-jitsu or something to that effect. Golf, tennis, bicycle, they all have this. Mixed martial arts, they all have this. Everybody has this. We don't. It makes me really sad. So I don't really care about the politics of it. I want to see the Russians wrestle in the Olympics because I want to see the best wrestlers wrestling. I outlined the reasons the UWW did a poor job, and if I have to add one more, it's we don't really get to see the best wrestlers wrestle all that often because the UWW calendar is set up in a format where a lot of the best people only compete 2 or 3 times a year. It's just, guys, that's just not enough to build the sport. It simply isn't, right? So if we're looking at the best tennis players, the best golfers, the best bikers, well, unfortunately, some of these fighters don't compete all that often, but a lot of fighters are competing 4 or 5 times a year, right? But when these best athletes only compete 2 or 3 times a year, it's tough to watch them. So I want to see the best wrestlers wrestle. That's why I'm sad Russia's not there. So this looks like, to me, a tremendous attempt for someone to diverge from the IOC, diverge to the Olympics, and say, we're going to start our own pro league, which will be the pinnacle of the sport of wrestling. Because as I've mentioned multiple times, all these other sports have a pinnacle of their sport, which is not the Olympics. That's what I would love us to have. So yes, I'm sad the Russians aren't competing because I want to see the best wrestlers wrestle. Great opportunity. Someone start a pro league. Let's do it.